The humming of my backup generator had become such a normal sound during my work from home days that I barely noticed it anymore. But apparently, my neighbor 3 houses down had been counting every single hour it ran. I'm Jake Morrison, and I moved to Riverside Meadows, a planned community in Gilbert, Arizona, about 18 months ago. The house was perfect, the neighborhood seemed quiet, and I figured the HOA fees were just the price you paid for living somewhere nice. I worked as a software engineer for a tech company based in California, which meant I needed reliable power and internet during business hours. Arizona summers being what they are, with monsoons and grid strain, I invested in a quality propane generator as backup power. It was a Honda EU 7000 IS, one of the quieter inverter models on the market, specifically chosen because I didn't want to be that neighbor with the loud equipment. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday in late May. I found it tucked into my front door, an official-looking envelope with the Riverside Meadows HOA seal. Inside was a formal complaint stating that my use of a generator violated the community's noise ordinance and aesthetic standards. The letter was signed by Patricia Whitmore, HOA president, and included highlighted sections of the covenant I'd apparently violated. I read through it twice, confused. The generator sat behind my house, screened by decorative fencing I'd installed specifically to keep it out of sight. It only ran during power outages, or when I tested it monthly for about 15 minutes, as recommended by the manufacturer. The noise level at my property line was well below Gilbert's municipal code limits. I'd checked before installation. That evening, I drafted a polite response explaining my situation. I detailed the generator's specs, its limited use, and offered to demonstrate its noise level. I even included a copy of Gilbert's noise ordinance showing I was in compliance with city regulations. Patricia responded within 48 hours. The new letter was less friendly. According to her, the HOA covenants superseded city regulations within the community, and generators were classified as industrial equipment, not permitted for residential use. She demanded I remove it within 14 days or face fines starting at $250 per day. I called an emergency meeting with the HOA board. Patricia agreed, though her tone on the phone suggested she considered it a waste of time. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday evening at the community center, a bland beige building near the neighborhood entrance. When I arrived, Patricia was already there with 2 other board members. Patricia looked exactly like I'd imagined. Mid-50s, perfect blonde highlights, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She had that particular expression I'd come to recognize, the one that said she was used to getting her way and couldn't fathom why anyone would challenge her authority. The other board members were Robert Chen, the treasurer, and Linda Martinez, the secretary. They both looked uncomfortable, sitting slightly apart from Patricia, who commanded the head of the table like a general planning a military campaign. "Mr. Morrison," Patricia began before I'd even fully sat down, "I trust you received our correspondence regarding the generator issue." I did, which is why I wanted to meet. I think there's been a misunderstanding about how and when I use it. There's no misunderstanding. The covenants are quite clear. Section 12, Paragraph 4 states that no industrial or commercial equipment may be operated on residential property. A generator is industrial equipment. I pulled out my own copy of the covenants, one I'd thoroughly reviewed after receiving her first letter. I've read that section. It's referring to things like commercial-grade air compressors, manufacturing equipment, or running a business that requires industrial machinery. A residential backup generator is standard equipment. Half the houses in Arizona have them. Not in Riverside Meadows, they don't, Patricia said firmly. We have standards here. Our property values are among the highest in Gilbert because we maintain those standards. Robert cleared his throat. Actually, Patricia, I have a generator too. It's in my garage. I've had it for 3 years. Patricia's expression could have frozen the Arizona desert. That's different. Yours isn't visible or audible. Mr. Morrison's has been reported multiple times for excessive noise. By who? I asked. And when? I've only used it during power outages and for monthly testing. The last outage was 3 weeks ago and lasted about 2 hours. The complaints are from concerned residents who wish to remain anonymous, Patricia said, shuffling papers unnecessarily. The frequency of use is irrelevant. The equipment itself violates our standards. Linda spoke up, her voice quiet. I drove by Mr. Morrison's house before this meeting. You can't even see the generator from the street. And Jake, when you do run it, what time of day is that usually? During business hours, 9 to 5. I work from home, and when the power goes out, I need to keep working. The generator powers my office, the refrigerator, and the AC for that part of the house. And like I mentioned, it's a quiet model. At my fence line, it measures about 58 decibels, roughly the same as normal conversation. Patricia's lips thinned. This isn't a debate. The board has made its decision. The generator must go or you'll face daily fines. With all due respect, Patricia, I haven't heard the board decide anything. I've heard you decide something. I kept my voice level professional. I'm asking for a formal board vote, as is my right according to the HOA bylaws. That caught her off guard. Robert and Linda both sat up straighter, and I could see Patricia calculating. She hadn't expected me to actually know the rules. Fine, she said after a long pause. All in favor of requiring Mr. Morrison to remove his generator. Patricia raised her hand. Robert and Linda didn't move. All opposed. 2 hands went up. Patricia's face went through several interesting color changes. This isn't over, she said, gathering her papers with sharp, angry movements. I'll be reviewing this matter with our legal counsel. There are other provisions you may be violating, Mr. Morrison. I suggest you review the covenants very carefully. The meeting ended badly. Patricia stormed out, leaving Robert and Linda to awkwardly excuse themselves. Robert paused at the door. Watch yourself, he said quietly. Patricia doesn't lose often, and she really doesn't lose gracefully. She's been HOA president for 8 years, and she's pushed out 3 families who challenged her. Pushed out how? Constant violations, fines, legal threats. She made their lives miserable until they sold and left. Just be careful. He wasn't kidding. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 5 separate violation notices. My trash cans were visible from the street for 45 minutes after pickup. They were supposed to be stored within 30 minutes. My lawn was a 1/4 inch too long in one section. My mailbox post needed repainting. A decorative rock in my front yard was inconsistent with approved landscaping materials. My garage door was left open for longer than the permitted 15 minutes while I unloaded groceries. Each violation came with a $50 fine. I documented everything with photos, timestamps, and measurements. The trash can thing was ridiculous. I'd been at work when they measured. The lawn measurement was disputed by my own photos taken the same day. The mailbox looked identical to every other mailbox on the street. The rock had been there when I bought the house. The garage door claim was simply false. I contested every fine in writing, providing evidence. Patricia rejected every appeal. The fines stood and new ones kept coming. My next-door neighbor, Tom Bradley, caught me checking my mailbox for the daily violation notice one evening. He was retired military, straightforward and observant. She's doing the same thing she did to the Hendersons, he said, watering his front plants. They had a boat in their driveway for one weekend, fully covered and legal according to the covenants. Patricia claimed it was an eyesore and started finding violations for everything else. They fought for 6 months and finally gave up and moved. Why does everyone just let her do this? Tom shrugged. Most folks don't want the headache. They pay the fines, or they don't do anything that attracts her attention. The board elections are rigged anyway. She controls the nominating committee, and she's got 3 or 4 other homeowners who vote however she tells them to. The rest of us just try to stay off her radar. That's not how it's supposed to work. No, but that's how it does work. Just giving you a heads up. You seem like a good guy, and I hate seeing this happen again. I appreciated Tom's warning, but I'd already decided I wasn't backing down. I'd done nothing wrong, and I'd bought my house with legitimately earned money. Some power-hungry HOA president wasn't going to bully me out of my own home. Then the heat arrived early. Arizona in June is always hot, but that year was exceptional. Temperatures hit 115 degrees by the first week, and the power grid started struggling. Rolling blackouts were announced, scheduled to hit different neighborhoods during peak hours to prevent total grid failure. The first scheduled blackout for Riverside Meadows was set for Thursday, June 8th, from 2 to 6 in the afternoon. The hottest part of the day, naturally, I made sure my generator was fueled and ready. I'd continued using it despite Patricia's objections, since the board had voted against requiring its removal. The fines for other violations now totaled nearly $800, all of which I was formally disputing. When the power cut out at 2 sharp, I had my generator running within 3 minutes. My home office stayed cool, my equipment stayed on, and my client meeting continued without interruption. Outside, the temperature was 113 degrees. At 4:30, my doorbell rang. Patricia stood on my porch, her makeup slightly melted, looking distinctly uncomfortable. A teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, stood behind her, face flushed red. "Mr. Morrison," Patricia began, her voice tight, "I wonder if you might be willing to help with a small situation." "What kind of situation?" "My air conditioning is out, obviously, due to the power situation. My granddaughter Charlotte is visiting, and she's not handling the heat well. I thought perhaps you might have some extra capacity on your generator to run a small window unit, just for her room." I looked past Patricia to Charlotte, who genuinely looked miserable and possibly heat-stressed. Then back to Patricia, whose expression was caught between desperation and fury at having to ask me for anything. "You want me to run an extension cord from the generator you've been demanding I remove?" "This is a health and safety issue, Mr. Morrison. Charlotte has a medical condition that makes her sensitive to extreme heat." "I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe you should take her somewhere with power. The library, a mall, a cooling center. The city set up several specifically for the blackouts." "Those are for people without resources," Patricia said, and there was the disdain I'd expected. "We shouldn't have to go to some public shelter. But you should be able to demand I share my private generator, the one you've been trying to force me to get rid of." Charlotte swayed slightly. She really didn't look good. I swore internally, my conscience winning over my desire to tell Patricia exactly where she could go. "Charlotte can come inside," I said. "My guest room is cool. She can stay there until the power comes back or until you make other arrangements." "But I'm not running power to your house, Patricia." Patricia's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Charlotte came inside gratefully, and I got her some cold water and showed her to the guest room. She thanked me quietly and collapsed onto the bed near the air conditioning vent. Patricia lingered at my door. "I suppose you think this changes things." "I think your granddaughter was suffering from heat exposure, and I'm not a monster. That's all. It doesn't change the fact that you've been abusing your position to harass me for having legitimate backup power. It's not legitimate. The covenants don't say what you claim they say, and you know it. The board voted against your interpretation. You've been filing false violations ever since. They're not false. I have photographic evidence of each one. Evidence you manufactured by measuring incorrectly, using selective timing, and outright lying. I've documented everything, Patricia. Keep pushing, and I'll file a formal complaint with the state HOA oversight board and sue for harassment. She glared at me, then seemed to remember her granddaughter was inside my house depending on my goodness. Charlotte can stay until 6 when the power comes back. Yes. Patricia left and I went back to work. Charlotte slept through the rest of the blackout, exhausted from the heat. When the power returned at 6, I woke her gently and she called her grandmother to pick her up. She thanked me several times, clearly embarrassed by the whole situation. Patricia arrived in her white Lexus SUV and collected Charlotte without a word to me. I thought that might be the end of it, maybe even a turning point. I was wrong. The next violation notice claimed I'd run my generator during prohibited hours. According to a suddenly discovered clause Patricia cited, generators could only be used between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on weekdays. The blackout had extended to 6 p.m., but I'd continued running my generator until 6:30 to cool the house back down after Charlotte left. The fine was $500 for extended violation of noise ordinances during quiet hours. The quiet hours clause was real, but it applied to things like construction work, loud parties, and lawn equipment, not emergency backup generators during a heat crisis. I was beyond frustrated now. This was escalating into genuine harassment. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. Her name was Jennifer Walsh, and she came highly recommended. After reviewing my documentation, she agreed I had a strong case. HOAs have significant power, but they can't act arbitrarily or vindictively, she explained during our consultation. You've got documented evidence of selective enforcement, retaliatory fines, and violations of your board vote. We can file an injunction against the HOA and demand they cease the harassment. If they don't, we can sue for damages and legal fees. How long does that take? Months, probably. Maybe longer. And it'll cost you several thousand in legal fees, even if you win and recover costs later. Is this the route you want to take? I thought about it. I thought about the principle, about Tom's story of other families driven out, about Patricia's entitled face when she demanded generator access for her granddaughter while simultaneously trying to force me to remove it. Send the injunction, I said, and start the lawsuit paperwork. I'm done playing games. Jennifer filed the paperwork the following week. The injunction was granted by a Gilbert municipal judge, temporarily preventing the HOA from assessing any new fines against me while the dispute was being resolved. Patricia was reportedly furious, according to Tom, who'd heard it from Linda at a neighborhood pool gathering. She was going on about ungrateful homeowners and legal technicalities, Tom reported. Linda said it was pretty ugly. Robert actually stood up and said you were right to defend yourself, and Patricia almost removed him from the board on the spot. Can she do that? Probably not legally, but that's never stopped her before. Watch yourself, Jake. She's backed into a corner now, and that makes her dangerous. June rolled into July and the heat got worse. The power grid was barely hanging on. More blackouts were announced, some scheduled, some emergency cutoffs when demand exceeded capacity. My generator became essential, running several times a week, sometimes for hours at a time. Other neighbors started asking about it. Tom wanted to know what model I'd bought. The Johnsons 2 streets over asked if I could recommend an installer. Even Robert stopped by one evening to ask about propane costs versus gasoline. People are seeing the wisdom in backup power, he said. Patricia can't hold back the tide forever. If we get more blackouts like this, half the neighborhood is going to want generators. The third week of July brought the crisis everyone had been fearing. A transformer station in Mesa failed catastrophically during a 118-degree day. Power went out across a huge section of the East Valley, including all of Gilbert. The initial estimate for repairs was 3 to 5 days. 3 to 5 days without power during the worst heat wave in Arizona history. My generator ran continuously. I kept my house cool, my food fresh, and my work uninterrupted. I could hear the hum of a few other generators in the neighborhood too, people who'd quietly installed backup power despite Patricia's crusade. By day 2, my doorbell was ringing constantly. Neighbors needed to charge phones, asking for ice, wondering if they could sit in my air conditioning for an hour. I helped where I could, but I couldn't power the whole neighborhood. Tom came over on the afternoon of day 2 with a cooler full of food from his dying freezer. Mind if I store this in yours? Everything I've got is going bad. Of course, come on in. We loaded his food into my freezer and Tom stood in my kitchen for a moment, just enjoying the cool air. Half the neighborhood evacuated to hotels, he said. The other half is either suffering or running generators. Patricia and her crowd went to some resort in Sedona. Convenient timing. I wasn't surprised. Patricia had resources and no problem using them while maintaining her position that backup generators were beneath Riverside Meadows standards. Day 3 brought an emergency. Robert called me mid-morning, panicked. "Jake, I need your help. Linda's husband has diabetes and their insulin is going bad. They can't find a hotel room anywhere. Everything's booked. Can they store their medication in your refrigerator?" "Absolutely." "Send them over right away." Linda and her husband Marcus arrived 20 minutes later with a small medical cooler. Linda looked exhausted, her usual composed demeanor cracked by stress and heat. "I can't thank you enough," she said, as I stored their insulin in my refrigerator. "We've been trying to find somewhere with power for 2 days. Marcus's backup insulin is at the pharmacy, but they don't have power either to dispense it properly." "Stay here," I offered. "I've got the guest room and an air mattress. You can't mess around with medication storage." They initially refused, not wanting to impose, but I insisted. Marcus's health wasn't something to gamble with, and I had the space and power to help. They moved in that afternoon with a few days of clothes and supplies. By day 4, my house had become an unofficial community center. Tom was storing food in my freezer. The Johnsons were charging their medical equipment. A family with a newborn came by twice a day to keep their breast milk and baby formula cold. I'd given up on privacy and just left my door unlocked during daylight hours, with a sign telling people to come in quietly if they needed help. The generator ran continuously, burning through propane. I'd planned for long-term use and had a large tank installed, but even that was draining faster than expected. I called my propane supplier, but they were swamped with emergency orders and couldn't guarantee a refill for several days. On the evening of day 5, I was sitting on my back patio, listening to the generator's steady hum and watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple when my phone rang. "Unknown number, local area code, Mr. Morrison. This is Patricia Whitmore." I almost hung up. "What can I do for you, Patricia?" "I'm calling regarding the current power situation. I've been informed that you've been operating your generator extensively and that several neighbors are relying on your electrical capacity." "That's correct. I'm concerned about liability." If someone is injured on your property during this situation, the HOA could be held responsible. I'm sorry, how would the HOA be responsible for who I invite into my home? The HOA has an obligation to maintain safe community standards. Your generator was never approved for this kind of use. Patricia, are you seriously calling me about HOA compliance during a 5-day blackout in July when it's 115 degrees outside? I'm calling because rules exist for a reason, Mr. Morrison. When power is restored, we'll need to have a serious discussion about your flagrant violations of community standards. You know what? No, we're done with that conversation. Your injunction is in place. My lawyer is preparing a lawsuit, and right now I'm helping people store medication and feed their babies while you're calling from a resort in Sedona. We've got nothing to discuss. I'm back in Gilbert, she said sharply. I returned yesterday to assess the situation. Great. Then you can see firsthand why backup power isn't some luxury violation but a basic safety necessity. Was there anything else? There was a long pause. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had changed slightly. Some of the hard edge softened. Marcus and Linda are staying with you. Yes. Marcus's insulin needed refrigeration. Another pause. That was good of you. Linda is a friend. I didn't know what to say to that. Patricia, as a human being with actual friendships, was hard to reconcile with Patricia, the tyrannical HOA president. I'm making sure she and Marcus are safe, I said finally. That's what neighbors do. Patricia ended the call without responding. I sat there in the growing darkness, the generator humming behind me, wondering what that conversation had actually been about. Day 6 brought salvation and new problems. The power came back online around noon, surging through the neighborhood in a wave of beeping appliances and relieved cheers. Air conditioners kicked on, refrigerators started humming, and the constant background anxiety of the heat lifted. I shut down my generator with genuine relief. It had performed perfectly, but 6 days of continuous operation had been stressful. I'd spent half my time monitoring fuel levels, checking connections, and making sure nothing overheated. Linda and Marcus moved back home, thanking me repeatedly and pressing a homemade lasagna into my hands as they left. Tom retrieved his food from my freezer. The Johnsons sent their teenage son over with a gift card to a restaurant as thanks. Other neighbors stopped by with various thank yous throughout the afternoon. By evening, I was exhausted but satisfied. I'd helped people when they needed it, and my generator had proved its worth beyond any doubt. Surely even Patricia had to recognize the reality now. I should have known better. The letter arrived the next morning. Not just one letter, but a thick envelope containing 4 separate violation notices and a formal hearing summons. According to Patricia's detailed documentation, I had violated noise ordinances 18 times during the 6-day blackout, operated commercial equipment in a residential zone, created a public nuisance by allowing non-family members to access my property in ways that violated community safety standards, and failed to obtain proper permits for operation of a community resource center. The total fines exceeded $6,000. I immediately called Jennifer, my lawyer. She was incredulous reading through the violations. "This is insane," she said. "These are entirely retaliatory and punitive. The noise ordinance claims are baseless during a power emergency. The Community Resource Center thing isn't even a real violation category. She's just making up rules now. Can she do that?" "No, but it'll take time and money to fight it. The hearing is scheduled for next week. I'll represent you and we'll dismantle every one of these claims." "But Jake, I have to be honest. This woman is relentless. Even when we win this, she's going to keep coming after you." "Then what do? We document everything, we win the hearing, we proceed with the lawsuit, and we push for her removal from the HOA board. It's time to play offense instead of defense. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday evening at the community center. Jennifer advised me to bring any witnesses who could testify to the necessity of the generator and the help I'd provided. I reached out to Tom, Linda, Marcus, and a few others. The day before the hearing, something unexpected happened. Robert Chen called me. "Jake, I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia has been calling board members and community supporters, pressuring them to attend the hearing tomorrow to speak against you. She's planning to pack the room and make an example of you. Let her try. I've got witnesses too. I know. And I'll be one of them. I'm testifying on your behalf. So is Linda. What Patricia is doing is wrong, and it's time someone stood up to her with something more than quiet disagreement. Robert, she'll retaliate against you too. Probably. But I'm retiring next year and moving to Colorado to be near my daughter. Patricia's power over me is limited. Besides, this isn't just about you anymore. She's turned the HOA into her personal fiefdom, and it's killing this community. People are afraid to plant flowers without checking with her first. That's not what an HOA is supposed to be. Tuesday evening arrived. I dressed professionally, gathered my documentation, and headed to the community center with Jennifer. The parking lot was packed. More cars than I'd ever seen there. Apparently, word had spread. Inside, the main room was set up like a courtroom, with a table for the board at the front and rows of chairs facing them. Patricia sat at the center of the board table, flanked by two other board members I didn't recognize. Robert and Linda were conspicuously absent from the board seating. The room was indeed packed. I recognized maybe a third of the faces. Some were neighbors I knew supported me. Others were clearly Patricia's people, older residents with similar expensive clothes and carefully maintained appearances. Patricia called the meeting to order with a gavel, as if this were an official court proceeding. She read through a formal agenda, then began presenting the violations against me. She'd prepared a presentation. An actual PowerPoint presentation with photos, sound-level readings, and testimonials from anonymous neighbors about the disturbance my generator had caused. It was impressively thorough and completely misleading. Every photo was taken from the most unflattering angle. The sound-level readings were allegedly taken but had no timestamps or verification. The testimonials were vague complaints about noise and disruption that could have been about anything. When Patricia finished, she looked directly at me. "Mr. Morrison, you've created a pattern of willful violation of community standards. You've been warned repeatedly, yet you continue to flagrantly disregard the rules that everyone else follows. This hearing will determine the appropriate consequences." Jennifer stood. "Miss Whitmore, before we proceed further, I'd like to clarify something. This is not a legal proceeding. This is an HOA meeting, and Mr. Morrison has rights under Arizona law and under your own bylaws. He has the right to present his defense, to call witnesses, and to appeal any decision to the full HOA membership. Are you prepared to follow those procedures?" Patricia's expression tightened. "Of course. We follow all appropriate procedures." "Excellent. Then I'll begin by noting for the record that every violation notice issued to Mr. Morrison is currently under injunction by the Gilbert Municipal Court, pending resolution of a lawsuit against this HOA for harassment and selective enforcement. Any additional fines or penalties issued tonight will be added to that lawsuit." A murmur went through the crowd. Clearly, not everyone knew about the legal action. Patricia's face went red. "The injunction is a temporary measure based on technicalities," she said. "It doesn't change the underlying violations. Actually, The injunction is based on a judge's determination that your actions appear retaliatory and legally questionable. But let's move forward. I'd like to call our first witness. Tom Bradley, please come forward. Tom stood from the audience and walked to the front. Jennifer asked him to describe what had happened during the 6-day blackout and what role my generator had played. Tom spoke clearly and directly. He detailed the heat, the failed power grid, the evacuation of half the neighborhood, and the critical help my generator had provided. He mentioned the medical supplies, the infant formula, the community support. Jake Morrison's generator probably saved lives, Tom concluded. At minimum, it prevented medical emergencies and severe heat-related illness. To call that a violation of anything is absurd. Patricia tried to interrupt several times, but Jennifer kept the testimony on track. Next came Marcus and Linda. Marcus, soft-spoken and dignified, explained his diabetes and the life-threatening risk of losing his insulin to heat. Linda testified about the desperation of finding help and the relief of having a safe place. Jake asked for nothing in return, Linda said. He opened his home, shared his resources, and made sure we were safe. That's what community means. That's what neighbors do. Several of Patricia's supporters shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't going the way she'd planned. Jennifer called 2 more witnesses, neighbors with similar stories. Each one painted a picture of community support and emergency response, not violations and nuisance. When the testimony concluded, Jennifer addressed the room. The evidence is clear. During a legitimate emergency, Mr. Morrison used legally owned equipment to protect his home and help his neighbors. Every action he took was reasonable, necessary, and lawful. The city of Gilbert had no complaints. The fire department had no concerns. The only objection comes from an HOA president with a documented history of harassment against Mr. Morrison. That's a serious accusation, Patricia said coldly. It's a factual statement. Jake, please provide Miss Whitmore with copies of every violation notice you've received in the past 3 months. I handed over a folder I'd prepared. Patricia flipped through it, her expression unreadable. Jennifer continued. 13 violations in 3 months, all minor, many disputed, several demonstrably false. Compare that to Mr. Morrison's neighbors. Tom, how many violations have you received this year? None, Tom said. Linda, 1 for a lawn issue. I paid the fine, fixed the problem, no follow-up. The pattern is clear. This isn't about community standards. This is personal retaliation because Mr. Morrison wouldn't comply with an unreasonable demand to remove essential safety equipment. The room was silent. Even Patricia seemed at a loss for words. Finally, Robert stood up from the audience. I'd like to make a statement, he said. As treasurer and a board member for 5 years, I've watched this HOA drift away from its purpose. We're supposed to maintain property values and community standards, yes, but we're also supposed to support homeowners and foster a genuine neighborhood. Patricia, you've done good work in many areas. But this situation is wrong. The violations are excessive. The targeting is obvious. And frankly, if we punish Jake for having backup power after what we just went through, we're failing as a board and as a community. Patricia stared at Robert with undisguised fury. You're out of order. No, I'm not. I'm a board member expressing my opinion at an open hearing. I move that we dismiss all pending violations against Jake Morrison and issue a formal apology. That's not how this works, Patricia snapped. Actually, it is, Jennifer interjected. Any board member can make a motion. It requires a second and a vote. Linda stood. I second Robert's motion. Patricia looked like she wanted to flip the table. This hearing is not for board votes. This is for determining Mr. Morrison's violations. Miss Whitmore, you're incorrect, Jennifer said. Under Arizona HOA law and your own bylaws, the board can vote to dismiss violations at any time. A motion has been made and seconded. A vote must be held. For a long moment, I thought Patricia might simply refuse. She looked at the packed room, at Robert and Linda standing in open defiance, at Jennifer's calm professional expression, and at me, the homeowner who'd refused to be bullied. "Fine," she said finally, her voice like ice. "All in favor of dismissing Mr. Morrison's violations." Robert and Linda raised their hands. The two other board members who'd been silent throughout looked at each other nervously. After a moment, they both raised their hands as well. All opposed. Patricia's hand went up alone. The motion passed, 4-1. The room erupted in murmurs and a few scattered applause. Patricia slammed her gavel down. "This meeting is adjourned," she announced and walked out of the room without another word. I sat there, slightly stunned. Jennifer patted my shoulder. "That went better than expected. She's got no case now, and she knows it. The lawsuit will probably settle quickly." Robert and Linda came over, along with Tom and several other neighbors. There were handshakes and congratulations. I felt relief and exhaustion in equal measure, but I also felt like this wasn't quite over. Patricia had lost publicly and dramatically. People like her didn't just accept that and move on. I was right to be cautious. Over the next 2 weeks, nothing happened, which was somehow more unnerving than the constant violations had been. No letters, no complaints, no Patricia sightings in the neighborhood. It was like the calm before a storm. Then the police showed up. It was a Monday morning. I was working from home in the middle of a video call when my doorbell rang insistently. I excused myself and found 2 Gilbert police officers on my doorstep. "Jake Morrison?" the first officer asked. "Yes. We've received a report of stolen property. Mind if we ask you a few questions?" "Stolen property? I haven't stolen anything." "The report claims you have a generator that was taken from a property in Riverside Meadows during the recent power outage. We need to verify ownership." I stared at them, momentarily speechless. Then anger flooded through me. "Who made this report?" Anonymous tip through the HOA. They provided photos of the generator and claimed it matched one reported missing. "Let me get my purchase receipt and registration," I said. "This is harassment, officers. I can prove I bought this generator 18 months ago and registered it with my insurance company." I retrieved my documentation while the officers inspected my generator. They were professional and polite, and it quickly became clear they'd figured out this was a false report. I showed them my purchase receipt from Home Depot, my insurance rider for the generator, and even the installation permit I'd gotten from the city. "This is obviously yours," the second officer said. "Whoever made that report wasted everyone's time. You might want to file a counter-report for false police reporting. Can you tell me anything about who filed it?" "It came through your HOA president, Patricia Whitmore. She claimed it was on behalf of a concerned resident, but she made the actual report." After the officers left, I called Jennifer immediately. She was furious. Filing a false police report is a crime. She's escalated this beyond civil harassment into criminal territory. "What do? We file a police report of our own, we inform the HOA board, and we push for her immediate removal. She's crossed a line, Jake. This isn't just abuse of power anymore." I filed the police report that afternoon. Jennifer sent formal notification to the HOA board and all members, detailing Patricia's false report and demanding an emergency board meeting to address her conduct. The emergency meeting happened 3 days later. The room was packed again, but the mood was different. People were angry. The false police report had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, and even Patricia's supporters seemed shaken by how far she'd gone. Patricia tried to maintain control, claiming she'd filed the report in good faith based on information from a resident. But when pressed to name the resident, she couldn't or wouldn't. Robert formally moved to remove her as HOA president. Linda seconded. The vote wasn't even close, 5-0 with Patricia abstaining. She was removed from her position effective immediately. "This is illegal," Patricia protested. "You can't remove me without proper cause and procedure." "We have cause," Robert said. "Filing a false police report, harassment of a homeowner, violation of your fiduciary duty to the HOA, and abuse of your position. You can appeal to the full membership if you want, but I think you know how that vote will go." Patricia left the meeting in fury, threatening lawsuits and revenge. But her power was broken. Without the HOA presidency, she was just another homeowner, subject to the same rules as everyone else. The following week, the Gilbert police concluded their investigation into the false report. They referred charges to the prosecutor's office. Patricia was charged with filing a false police report, a misdemeanor in Arizona. She hired an expensive lawyer and fought it, but the evidence was clear. My purchase receipt, the officer's testimony, and her own admission that she'd filed the report without verifying the information. She pled guilty to a reduced charge, paid a fine, and received probation. As part of the agreement, she was required to issue a formal written apology to me and to the HOA membership. The apology letter arrived in late August. It was brief, clearly written by her lawyer, and contained no actual acknowledgment of why her actions had been wrong. But it was in writing, it was part of the court record, and it was over. The HOA held new elections in September. Robert was elected president by a landslide. One of his first acts was to formally update the community covenants to explicitly allow backup generators, subject to reasonable noise and placement restrictions. The vote passed with over 80% approval. Patricia put her house up for sale in October. According to Tom, she was moving to Scottsdale to be near her daughter. "I didn't see her leave, and I didn't attend any goodbye gatherings if there were any. Some bridges, once burned, don't need rebuilding. My life in Riverside Meadows returned to normal. I used my generator when needed, without harassment or violation notices. I got to know my neighbors better, not just as people I waved to, but as an actual community. Tom and I started a weekly poker game. Linda and Marcus had me over for dinner monthly. The Johnson's son started a neighborhood newsletter. The following summer brought another heat wave and more blackouts. This time, a dozen houses had backup generators. We coordinated through a neighborhood group chat, helping each other with fuel sources, maintenance tips, and load sharing. When the power went out, Riverside Meadows stayed cool and safe. Robert ran the HOA efficiently and fairly. Violations were rare and reasonable. Fines were proportionate and consistently applied. Board meetings became productive discussions instead of performances of authority. Property values actually increased, not because of intimidation, but because people wanted to live in a genuinely well-managed community. I never pursued the lawsuit further. With Patricia gone and the harassment ended, there wasn't much point. Jennifer kept the case open for a while as leverage, but eventually we let it lapse. The injunction was lifted by mutual agreement, and life moved on. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground. It would have been easier to give in, to remove the generator or move to a different neighborhood. But easy isn't always right. Patricia had created a system where fear and compliance replaced community and cooperation. Breaking that system took stubbornness, documentation, good legal help, and neighbors willing to support each other when it mattered. The generator still sits behind my house, screened by the same decorative fence, humming quietly when the power fails. It's not just a piece of equipment anymore. It's a reminder that preparation isn't paranoia, that helping neighbors matters, and that standing up to bullies, even petty HOA tyrants, is worth the fight. Last week, a new family moved in 2 streets over. Young couple, first-time homeowners, clearly excited and nervous. I saw them at the mailboxes and introduced myself. "Welcome to Riverside Meadows," I said. "Great neighborhood, good people, functional HOA that stays out of your business unless there's a real problem." "That's a relief," the husband said. "We heard horror stories about HOAs before we bought." "Those stories exist for a reason," I admitted. "But this one learned its lesson. You have any issues, any questions, the board is actually helpful now. And if you ever need backup power advice, I'm your guy." We chatted for a few more minutes and I gave them my number. Walking back to my house, I thought about how different that conversation would have been 2 years ago. How much fear and tension had existed in the neighborhood under Patricia's rule, and how much better things were now. My generator kicked on as I reached my door. Another monsoon storm was rolling in, threatening the power lines. I smiled, listening to the familiar hum, and went inside to make sure my computers were protected. Just another day in Riverside Meadows, where the HOA actually worked the way it was supposed to, and backup generators were just common sense instead of community crimes. Some battles are worth fighting, especially when winning means everyone ends up better off. Even the people who opposed you initially could see eventually that being prepared and helping neighbors wasn't about breaking rules. It was about understanding what really mattered when things went wrong. The storm hit hard that evening, knocking out power to half of Gilbert. My generator ran smoothly, my house stayed lit and cool, and I slept soundly knowing that tomorrow wouldn't bring violation notices or harassment. Just another day in a neighborhood that had finally figured out what community actually meant.